Last year, millennials overtook baby boomers as America's largest generation. We're going to provide you insight and analysis from Generation Y that reflects that change.
Welcome to Wise Guys.
Today, let's talk about the National Security Council. We're going to explore exactly what the council is, who the new NSA, National Security Advisor, is, and figure out exactly why it matters to United States policy.
So first of all, we have to talk about what the National Security Council is. It's a foreign policy coordinating body. And it was founded in 1947. At that point, we had just finished World War II, and we were starting the Cold War.
Yeah.
So we knew that we would need to have some type of permanent body to oversee the policy-making process at the highest level. So they wanted some type of body to be able to deconflict all of these priorities and make it so that the president's guidance would be followed out by the departments.
So exactly who is on the National Security Council is how we can establish whether or not, the power it has, how the conversation's going, and what exact guidance the president is getting from it. Recent changes under the 45th president, President Donald Trump, have been instituted and affected the National Security Council. Specifically, he's gone ahead and removed two key players from being permanent members of the council. What players are these?
Right, so we're talking about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's your primary source for military advice. We're also talking about the Director of National Intelligence, your primary source of intelligence advice in this group. Now, they were probably downgraded, I think, more in a symbolic way.
Yeah.
Because they still said that they would be invited to meetings where they were pertinent, but I couldn't really imagine many meetings where you wouldn't need military or intelligence advice.
Right, and so that's important to remember. While they're no longer permanent members of the council, they can still be invited at any time upon the president's invitation. The question really is, though, why exactly do we think President Trump made this decision that really to shake up the council in such a way?
Right, so Ash and I kind of had a conversation about this, and I think we have a working theory, and we think that this was done as a symbolic move because the White House Chief of Strategy, Bannon, was put in and made a member along with the White House Chief of Staff, Priebus. So really you have a situation where there's a White House person receiving a more permanent presence, and then two of the traditional, I would say, powerhouses within this have been, I would say, downgraded not in a real power sense, but more in a ordinal ranking sense.
Yeah, I think that the way Wes and I are looking at this is that President Trump has made it so that the White House and his executive branch has the ability to effectively show favor via invitation to meetings like this. So if the intel community or the military advisors are not in line, he believes they're not doing what he would like them to do or not following his orders and his policy in the best way possible, he has the ability now to remove them from a really important conversation. Now, similarly, who Wes just mentioned is Stephen Bannon, who a lot of you guys have probably heard of. Bannon's gotten a lot of press in general, significant amount of it being controversial only because he has come on to the executive branch and become a counselor to the president in such a way that gives him a significant amount of unofficial influence and power. We don't really know exactly what Bannon's role is, but we do know that he can definitely sway President Trump's opinion.
Right, and I think that's the key when you're talking about the National Security Council, because it's about being close to the president and having the president's priorities and not the department's priorities put first. And if that piece isn't working, you can end up with chaos.
Now, there are a lot of historical examples of that chaos being created from different departments fighting over lead to it. One of the favorite ones, we were talking about this earlier, was actually in the H.W. Bush administration.
Right. I think there's good examples and there's bad examples. And to just start with one of the bad examples, I think the early Kissinger-Nixon relationship was a good one. But especially as some of the president's political capital eroded with the Watergate hearings, towards the end, the bureaucracies started to buck a little bit and saying, is this order coming from Kissinger or is this order coming from the president?
Right, exactly.
And even as he moved from National Security Advisor to the Secretary of State, I think he still had some of that problem when you don't have clear guidance on who's giving the orders and who's on the in and who's on the out. Now, one of the good examples we also talked about was Scowcroft. If you look at it under Bush, the first Bush, he ran the process very well, because this position, National Security Advisor, is all about process. Just being an honest broker, not inserting your own opinions into it, and getting the advice up to the president and getting the president's direction down to the deputies and the principals.
So with historical examples in mind, I think it's relevant to think about the changes that President Trump has made and realize that they may not be all bad just because they allow more vertical hierarchy of power to be in play. Anything coming from the chief of staff to the president or his senior advisor is more likely to be a very direct line of access to the president and what he's thinking than something that's coming from a department head. At the same time, I don't really know if I agree with the idea that intel and military leaders, and the main ones, can be uninvited from really important conversations like this. But the president is going in, and when he did this in just the end of January, it was absolutely to establish himself as a powerful leader of the executive branch and ensure that the different departments understood that that power came from him.
Right.
We just had a Lieutenant General, McMaster, taking on the role for a National Security Advisor. What are your thoughts on McMaster and how exactly he's going to change the dynamic of the council?
Right. I mean, the council is already pretty military heavy, and I think that's
Definitely
a legitimate issue that you have to talk about. And I think that's actually, I think maybe some people think that might be a Trump thing, and partly maybe it is, but I think it's also just how we do foreign policy has changed. It's a lot more militarized. The lead department tackling a lot of the issues is the Department of Defense, and the senior executives of that department are the generals, and I think he's trying to take people that he thinks are the most competent that have dealt with a lot of these issues. So of course Mattis, everybody should know his background in not only the Marine Corps but in Iraq, and he was a big proponent of coin. So I mean that's a huge figure to have. Kelly also huge, and now you have McMaster, who's I would say he's kind of an iconoclast in the Army.
Okay.
I mean, not everybody in the Army likes him.
Okay.
But I mean, I think he's an original thinker.
I mean, interestingly enough, while the Army opinion may be different, Trump's decision to name him as National Security Advisor was pretty much hailed positively by both Democrats and Republicans, at least in the civilian areas, across the board. Seemed like one of his most prudent, or I guess least controversial appointments for sure, after both Mattis and Kelly.
Right. And I mean, they're all good picks, but I mean, it really goes down to how they interact.
Exactly. What the dynamic is going to be between them on the council, and often between them and Steve Bannon, who is clearly going to be a force for swaying President Trump's influence in some way or his mind. So I guess that's an important transition point. Let's talk about Mattis, Kelly, and McMaster. How do we think that they, all coming from military backgrounds, Mattis and Kelly having worked together before, how do we think that they're all going to be working together? Are they going to be butting heads? Are they going to put up a direct conflict to what Steve Bannon would like to happen? Or are they going to be conflicting or fighting between themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some tension there. Not so much between Kelly and Mattis. I mean, I think they're pretty much as close as two people can really get at this level of government.
Sure.
They had served in war together, and Kelly was pretty much Mattis's right-hand man.
Wow.
So I don't think you're going to see a lot there. But first of all, with McMaster, he is in more of a political role now. And you kind of saw that, and I think there was kind of a gaffe he made about basically saying that Islamic fundamentalism and labeling it like that was kind of a problem.
I think explicitly he said that saying Islamic extremism and Islamic fundamentalist terrorism is not the most prudent way to go about accomplishing what we want to abroad. And you can agree or disagree with that for sure. I think there's a lot of arguments on both sides on why it's important to say the words or why it's not as productive to be using those words. But I think that McMaster may have stumbled into a political arena that he wasn't prepared to.
Right. He shouldn't. His job is to shepherd the process, and I don't think his job is to get into a domestic political debate. So he's got to handle the politics.
That's new for him.
It's new for him.
Yeah.
At that level. And the other thing we've got to realize is he's a 3-star, and he's in charge in a way of his 4-star peers now.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's going to
pretty
be
huge.
a little bit of friction there.
Sure.
Potentially.
So I think I think it's fair to say that because Mattis and Kelly are so close, that we're really making Mattis into a more powerful player on this council for
I
sure.
think that's right.
So we've got McMaster, who's technically leading the council. The way the council works is while the president is the chairperson, more often than not, the president won't be able to attend every meeting, and McMaster will be the one who actually calls the meetings, leads them, establishes what the session is going to be discussing, and will be giving the president the policy proposals at the end, assuming he can keep President Trump's approval and I guess keep his favor in wanting to and making sure President Trump wants to listen to him. So Mattis and McMaster may have some tension down the line, and that's really going to influence a lot of the way President Trump listens to these different branches, I think.
Right. And that McMaster-Trump relationship is the key to the entire thing.
Yeah.
I mean, how they get along is how effective this body is going to be at making sure our foreign policy works.
Couldn't agree more. That was just a little bit of insight into what the National Security Council is. If you have any other questions that you think we should tackle or anything else you would like to discuss about the NSC, feel free to give us an email or a tweet. Hope to see you next time.